Sounds good. So here's the bell ringer for today. Just review what we went over yesterday. So give examples of each here. Describe and give examples of hindsight bias, halo effect, and priming. Oh, there we go. There we go. So I'll let you guys work on this. How about like 3 or 4 minutes, just because you got to give examples for each. Quick reminder. So if you haven't done any work for me for the past 2-3 weeks, you have till this Friday, and that's it, okay? So please, if you see on your grade book, EXs, that means exempt, but that's just for now. And so you have till Friday to complete that, put it in a grade book, and we'll be good. All right? So again, everything's by the due date from here on out. Friday, from those 2 weeks that we may have been out when we're on COVID quarantine. So please make sure that you take note of the grade book in Sapphire. There are EXs, that means you still owe it. And you have till Friday to do so. Reminder, current events. We got. Wait, Madison. I'm gonna mess that up. There's no Madison in here. Madison? Oh, okay. Yeah, she wasn't here the past 2 days, so that's why. Madison, you're watching at home. Current events for Friday.
You got way.
I know. I guess this should be a semicolon. There. There you go. Do that for Friday. Oh, okay. You give a further video lessons for knowing. Do you have any questions? What's up? Yeah, you guys are ripping up all our shirts. No. No, some of the cheerleaders have thrown that, huh? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, you guys gotta behave when you're over there. Okay, that's what I've been hearing. What I've been hearing. Go ahead. Parker, what's up? Pretty good. Pretty good. We're working on the bell ringer right now, and we're about to discuss it. 3, 2, 1 now. Okay. So let's start off with priming. What is priming? What does that mean? Try to put it towards the board here so you can maybe see. What's priming? What do we got here? Parker, go ahead. All right.
When you see something that influences your opinion,
Okay, yeah, good job. And where do you see priming a lot? Who tries to utilize priming? What's that? Stores, yeah, businesses. Okay, good job. Restaurants to make you try to buy a certain product. Good. Here, we'll just do a little simulation. Okay. We're gonna fill in this word here. We're gonna finish it off. What do you think? So I'm thinking of, let's say, Old Spice, Dove, soap. Okay. Okay, good. That was easy, right? That was easy. Okay, next one here. Campbell's Chunky Soup. Okay, all right, there you go. Pretty simple, guys. Pretty simple. So if you ever see those, I'm sure you have before. That's just a way of priming. Can you give a little certain hints here and there? You know, the word can totally change on it. But with restaurants, especially, they try to do this with their pricing. It's like, oh, Burger King, you buy a sandwich, a cheeseburger, let's say a Whopper, you get one $4. Heck yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to dive into that deal. And that's their way of trying to push you to buy and purchase an item. When you're inside restaurants, they play songs, music, or just the culture of the restaurant, of inside the internal view of it. Maybe that'll try to push you to buy some of these items that typically maybe you wouldn't try to purchase. I know I gave that example of when I was at an Irish pub. It's like, oh man, I got to get the soup, the crock pot soup. Okay, just because I'm in an Irish pub. I hear the music, I hear the songs. I want to purchase a burger with just Cooper cheese all over, onion straws, you name it. So again, restaurants, businesses, they try to prime you to purchase some of their items. Okay, to try to persuade you to purchase them. Okay, and again, there's other examples that you can talk about with priming. Maybe with extra credit. Okay, maybe I'm trying to offer extra credit here in the class. I'm going to try to prime you to do the work, to do your best work, to try to receive those extra credit points. Does that make sense, guys? Pretty self-explanatory. So within studies, within research, great way to try to find an answer that you're looking for, depending on what type of surveys or questions you're asking, you can try to prime someone into the answer you're looking to grab, right? The answer that you're looking to see. All right, good. So that's priming. What about hindsight bias? What's that mean? Hindsight bias. Kiara? What do you have for hindsight bias? The knew it all along effect, right? Yeah, good job. So this is, let's say, an event that occurs and you're looking back on it, you're like, oh, I could have predicted that. I could have knew, I could have known what the conclusion, the outcome of that event would have been. Okay, they didn't have to play it out. They didn't have to see exactly what happened. I knew this was going to occur. This was going to happen. And I know I related it to with sporting events, okay, with a football game, right? So with James Buchanan, that first game of the year, did you guys know exactly you're going to win? Yeah, confidence wise, oh yeah, we're going to win. We're going to beat this team. But you don't know exactly you're going to win until the game is over. That's why with gambling, with bettors, they oftentimes, if they don't bet on something that they maybe had an intuition to push for, to maybe bet on, after the outcome's already reached, like, oh, I should have bet on that. I knew that outcome was going to happen. When all reality, you didn't. Okay. What examples do you come up with, Christian? You say the football game? Yeah. Brady, same thing? Okay. Good, good. You guys good on that? Yeah. So again, when you're trying to formulate a hypothesis, when you're trying to, let's say, run through the experimentation, you got to make sure that you keep that hindsight bias out of your mind. You need to make sure you follow these steps, these guidelines, and make sure that these confounding variables are out of your research, out of your experiment. Because if not, that could really skew your data. And people might not think of it as justifiable. Okay. Good, good, good. Clear on that? Awesome. And the last one, halo effect. What do you have for halo effect? Brady, what do you have? I know you talked about this yesterday.
Wait.
Yeah, good job. Depending on the person, depending on, let's say we're testing on, okay, we might act totally different. Okay, our interactions with this person might be totally different than, let's say, someone else. And I know I gave the example of relationships. Okay, so if you have a brother or sister, they spill a drink in your car, you're probably going to ream them out. You're going to cuss them out. Who knows? Hopefully it's not Caitlin because, man, she's pretty good with cussing people out. I'm just kidding. So let's just say there's a total stranger in the car. Let's say a close friend, maybe. Okay, you might act totally different if they spill a drink in your car. It's like, you know what? I'll clean it up. Don't worry about it. When they leave the car, you might be talking bad about them. But for the most part, your interactions with that person is totally different depending on who they are. So again, with research, with going through the scientific method, coming up with a hypothesis, with our research participants, you got to make sure this halo effect is clear out of the picture. Because again, it could skew your results, skew your data. Does that make sense, guys? Awesome. Awesome. All right, terms for today. Oh, let me just move this one down. There we go. Okay, I only have one, the clever Hans effect. We'll talk about that today. And we'll relate another study done by a fourth grader back in the day, which really raised a lot of eyebrows. And we can look at that study when comparing to this empirical approach. All right, so what do we have? Clever Hans effect. What is it? What is it? What do we got here? Noah, what do you have for the clever Hans effect? What's that? Okay, all right, good job, good job. So with this clever Hans effect, with the experiments, especially with this one we're about to talk about, this is an interesting study, especially when it comes to conditioning and when it comes to almost tricking an audience. And this was done right around the early 1900s, right before World War One. And unfortunately, we'll talk about the ending of this force. Terrible, terrible way to go. But for a short time period in Germany, this force was fooling many people and duking many people into spending a lot of money to watch this force do mathematical equations. I think it's kind of funny how many people believe this, but again, with this clever Hans effect is, well, we need to make sure that the research is backing some of this information and that we can use the research scientific method to try to apply and understand these certain scenarios and try to make things more clear, I guess you could say, and try to maybe pick out the falsifiable content in some of these scenarios by applying the scientific method to it. All right, so I'm going to discuss real quick what this was all about, and I have a short reading for you, and then I'll play a video once you guys are all done with the reading and 3 questions. It shouldn't take you too long to do. Okay, but I think it's an interesting story, and we can definitely apply it to the scientific method and how research is performed. Oh, wrong thing. I didn't want to do that. There we go. All right, so the story of Clever Hans in Germany back in the early 1900s, right before World War One, there was a really interesting story about a horse that could do mathematical equations, and people would gather from far and wide to come see this horse really perform these mathematical equations, and it was amazing to many people. And given the time period, not many people had an education or an opportunity to an education. So when this horse comes up and is answering these mathematical equations, people are like, "What is going on? This is unbelievable. How smart is this horse? It's crazy, right? It's crazy." So again, people would gather far and wide. And I often think, come on, like this is unbelievable. Why would people even do this? Why would people spend the time and money to go see this horse do math equations? Well, entertainment wasn't really a big thing back then. It's not like they had sporting events all over the place and it was broadcasted and on the radio. Okay, radio still at that time was very, it was just being developed. So this was something that people did. Okay, they wanted to see exactly how this horse could do this amazing things. So there's many people like zoologists, okay, many psychologists, and many educators that would come and try to understand and decide how Clever Hans is performing these mathematical problems. So they would study him. They would try to come out and pick out different equations to try to stump the horse. And for the most part, not all the time, the horse did a really good job at answering these questions. Okay, it was almost like an 86% chance that Clever Hans could answer the question right. And again, people were just amazed by this. They couldn't believe it. And maybe some of the questions that were asked by some of these, let's say, professors or these educators were so advanced that even common people around the audience had no clue what the answer was either. So again, that goes to lack of education for many people at that time period. But anyway, many people were just so fascinated by Clever Hans and what he could do. All right, so this man that was performing these studies, his name was von Austin. Okay, sorry, von Austin was a horse trainer. He would bring his horse all around and make a lot of money off of him. And von Austin would oftentimes stand right in front of Clever Hans when he's trying to perform these mathematical equations. So, just thinking about this idea, what do you think von Austin was doing to help Clever Hans answer these questions? What do you think? The only way Clever Hans could answer the questions was if von Austin was in his eyesight, was in his viewpoint. What do you think he was doing? What do you think he was doing? Any ideas, maybe? Hadley? Oh, what do you mean by cues? Okay, all right. So maybe Clever Hans would tap the hoof whenever he would maybe make a facial cue or a hand movement. Okay, good job, good job. So yeah, Clever Hans would say, "Hey, what's 5 + 2?" And then Clever Hans would tap his hoof 7 times, and people would be cheering, jumping up in the air. So yeah, that's kind of what Funks, who were the psychologists who found out exactly what Clever Hans was doing and Von Austin was doing, he decided to watch Von Austin. He decided to watch how Von Austin would trigger maybe a movement of Clever Hans to answer these questions with his hoof tapping. So Funks would sit back and say, "You know what? I'm going to come up with a hypothesis to try to figure this out." So he said, "You know what? If Clever Hans couldn't see Von Austin, then he can't answer these mathematical equations, or he won't be able to get them right." So they would put blinders on Clever Hans. They would often put Von Austin way out of the picture that Clever Hans could see. And after time and time again, Clever Hans couldn't answer the questions right at all. I think there's a couple of times where he did. So it was like maybe a 12% chance he would get the question right. But for the most part, without Von Austin in his eyesight, There's no way clever Hans could get these answers right. And it just goes to show what conditioning can do. And what is conditioning? I know I talked about it quite a bit. It's not something you put in your hair, shampoo. Just kidding. What is conditioning? Or you guys at football practice, what you do to try to get prepared for running long runs, right, Christian? Yeah. That first game you're back, you're a little tired with it. Yeah. So what is conditioning though? What's that? Practice. Yeah, good job. Okay, so it's like practice. Yeah, it's learning. It's understanding different things. And Von Austin would give facial cues for clever Hans to understand, to tap his hoof whatever amount of times he would want. And to make clever Hans stop tapping his hoof, he would just raise his eyebrows. So folks, after time and time again, following Von Austin around and probably paying a pretty penny to go see him perform these mathematical equations, he finally figured out, well, let's just put blinders on clever Hans. Let's remove Von Austin from the scenario and see how clever Hans can actually do this experiment. And interesting enough, he couldn't, right? He couldn't. And this is really just describing what was going on. And I think it's an interesting story, especially when you try to apply it to this scientific method. How can facial cues, right? How can conditioning, how can the scientific method be applied to eliminate some of these scenarios, right? Some of these fascinations that people gather around and spend money on. And this was one of the first studies performed where we can actually apply the scientific method to, and this modern form of psychology, especially at this time, can be applied to maybe answer some of these fascinating things. So again, I will have a video for you here just explaining this study, and there's also a reading in your book, which is 3 questions for you to answer. But I wanted to introduce this now so we can apply it to the scientific method moving forward. And I have another study for you too, Emily Rose's experiment with therapeutic touch practitioners that I think you guys will enjoy. And she tries to disprove that pseudoscience. Okay, that's pseudo psychology, I guess you would say. And it is pretty interesting. A 4th grader telling people that their work, their career doesn't mean anything and that there's no backing behind it. Oh, what a slap in the face, right? A slap in the face. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow. All right, so is there any questions on Clever Hans? So what do you think happened to Clever Hans then, the horse? How'd he die? Obviously he died, he's old. They killed him. All right, so in World War I in the trenches, we all know, if you took me in American history last year, was there a lack of food and resources in the trenches? Yeah. So what do you think happened to Clever Hans? A lot of the German soldiers thought, well, we have no food, we're running on food, we're starving. They killed poor Clever Hans and ate him. Oh, poor Clever Hans. He was amazing. And they just killed him and ate him. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So I think that's kind of interesting to talk about, especially with poor Clever Hans the horse. All right, so I'm gonna play this video for you guys and I'll let you guys get working on this assignment. So Raven, that's all I have for today. Just watch that video that I've attached. I'll post it here soon once this is done uploading on YouTube. And then you can complete those questions.
Where do I find the questions?
It's going to be on page 46 in your book, and I'll put the questions up on Canvas in the modules.
All right, then. Thank you.
Yep.